Because of individual differences, people handle concerns in different ways. Always remember that seeking a mental help will not make you weak. So we only have different ways of handling our problem. So kapag nakita mo na nag-seek siya ng counseling, nag-seek siya ng psychological help, that doesn't mean na mahina na siya. It is only because she have or he have his own way of dealing with his problem. Now we are going to define what is counseling. So counseling is a field of study or a discipline that is involved in the provision of advice or guidance in decision making, in particularly in emotionally significant situations. So counseling is not merely giving an advice. So when we say counseling, it is the provision or guidance when it comes to decision making. So ang magde-decide pa rin si patient or si client, hindi si counselor. Okay? So counseling, it is just that you are giving him the situation wherein he can choose or he can decide what he or she will do. We also have other descriptions of counseling. So number 1, counseling involves the process wherein a client and the counselor set aside time to explore issues, difficulties that may be bothering the client. This may include feelings that cause stress and confusion in the client. So the number 1 description, meron siyang sinasabi na it explore issues or difficulties that bothers the client. So ang sinasabi dito, when you seek counseling, you will try to find out ano-ano ba yung mga issue or difficulty na meron ka right now or in the previous situation. Ano ba yung nagpa-bother sa'yo? Ano ba yung nagpa-stress sa'yo? Ano ba yung confusion na na-experience mo? So be prepared to answer all the question of the counselor for you to find out kung ano ba yung mga issues or difficulties na meron ka. Number 2, counseling also involves the act of helping the client see things in a different perspective, thus enabling him to focus clearly on feelings, experiences, or behavior, and facilitate in him a positive change. So one more thing, so counseling involves the act of helping the client. Bakit natin siya tinutulungan? So when we say counseling, you will be able to let the client see the other perspective. So for example, there is a situation wherein the situation, it made him feel na negative siya or it made him feel confused or bothered. So ang gagawin mo, you will let him feel or you will let him see the different perspective. You will give another situation wherein he can clear his mind. So in that way, he can clearly focus sa feelings, sa behavior, and it can facilitate a positive change. Kasi kapag diba nagbago yung perspective niya dun sa isang situation, so ang mangyayari, there is a change. Ano ba yung change na yun? Maiisip niya na, ay, oo nga, baka nga ganon. Okay? Ay, pwede ko siyang gawin. Pwede nga palang gawin yung ganon. Okay? Number 3, counseling also depicts a relationship trust. Confidentiality of the client's issues and what takes place in the sessions is significant to the success of counseling. So the first thing that you need to do if you are doing the counseling is to build a trust. So this is what we call rapport, right? So we need to build a trust. We need to build a mutual understanding para magkaroon ng loyalty, magkaroon ng honest session with the client and the counselor. So, yun nga. Kung sa una pa lang na ipakita mo na sa kanya na you are sincere to help him. So, ang mangyayari, he or she will give him your trust. This is the other thing that you need to remember, that counseling is not, number one, giving advice. So, counseling is a term that is not easy to define and may even be confusing to many. So, lagi nating tatandaan itong mga to. So, number one, yun nga, counseling is not giving advice. Bakit? So, contrary to what we believe, 'di ba? So, ang akala natin, counseling is just giving an advice. So, counseling does not entail advice giving. Instead, a counselor provides intelligent choices for the client to make for his adjustment. So, katulad ng nabanggit ko kanina, as a counselor, you need to give a different situation. You need to let the client see the different perspective. In that way, he or she can make a choice for himself. Next one, counseling is not judgmental. A counselor is not subjective nor biased, but maintains objectivity in dealing with the client. So when we say counseling is not judgmental, so we are trying to say here is that kahit ano pang sinabi mo, kahit ano pang nagawa mo, we won't judge you. Okay? So kahit ano pang nasabi ng client mo, kahit ano pang nasabi ng counseling mo, you don't need to judge. You don't need to correct him or her on the spot. Okay? Kasi hindi tayo bias, hindi tayo subjective. Okay? But we need to maintain the objectivity. Ano ba yung objectivity na sinasabi natin? Ito yung makapili ng choice si client para sa sarili niya. Number 3. So, counseling is not sorting out client's problem. So, what we believe is that the counselor, siya yung nagsasort ng problem ni client. So, which is mali. Okay? So, ang trabaho ni counselor is to give a different perspective. Ang trabaho ni counselor is to give a different choice sa client. And then, si client pa rin ang pipili kung ano ang gagawin niya. Si client pa rin ang magsasort out ng problem niya. Si client pa rin ang hahanap kung ano ba ang naging problema niya. Okay? And lastly, counseling is not expecting a client behave in a certain way. So, while you are doing the session, while you are doing the counseling, as a counselor, you're not going to expect the client to behave in a certain way. Diba? So, hindi natin ini-expect si client na magsasalita siya ng honestly. Hindi natin ini-expect si client na magbe-behave siya while you're having the session. Hindi natin ini-expect si client na hindi siya iiyak. Okay? So, we need, as a future counselor, you need to think about ano kaya ang magiging situation ko, ano kaya ang magiging situation namin while undergoing the counseling. Okay? The counselor instead opens the eyes of the client on the different possibilities of how to deal with these situations. Kasi 'di ba, may mga tendency talaga na iiyak siya. May mga tendency talaga na hindi siya magsasabi ng totoo. May mga tendency talaga na hindi niya malaman kung ano talaga ang problema niya. Okay? So, always remember na it is always up to the client to make the choice. Okay? In every situation, in every counseling session, there is always a goal. So, number 1 goal we have is change in behavior. So, bringing about positive changes in behavior is one of the significant goals of counseling. Bakit kaya goal natin si change in behavior? Bakit kaya natin ito nasabi? It is because kaya nga siya nag-undergo ng counseling because there is a problem. There is a difficulty. Right? So, ang mangyayari, after counseling, our number 1 goal is that may change in behavior. Okay? So, positive change, of course. Hindi naman yung magbabago siya in a negative way. We always think about in a positive changes sa behavior. So, these changes may involve the client's feelings, thoughts, beliefs, or overall behavior towards issues. Yung magbabago yung pananaw niya sa naging problema niya. Yung magbabago yung pananaw niya dun sa situation na kinaharap niya. Right? So, yun yung mga change in behavior na gusto nating makita kay counseling, after the counseling. Okay? The usual responses to frustrating issues are redirected, and there is assumption of positive attitudes towards people and the self. So, yun na nga. Pumapasok na yung positive attitude towards people and his own self. Yun yung tinatawag nating change in behavior. Number 2, we have the mental health. So, for this, the primary goal of counseling is to do no harm. Okay? So, while you are doing the counseling, lagi mong iniisip, is it healthy for his or her mental health? Healthy pa ba sa kanya kung sasabihin ko ito? Healthy pa ba sa kanya kapag naisip niya yung ganitong situation? Healthy pa ba sa kanya kapag pumili na siya ng choice niya? Okay? So, lagi nating tatandaan yung is to do no harm. Services provided by the counselor aims to promote positive mental health. Resiliency has to be developed through the counseling process to enable clients to bounce back after a disaster of a life. So, resiliency. Ano ba yung tinatawag nating resiliency? So, when we say resiliency, ito yung kayang-kaya mong mag-cope up sa problem mo or sa environment mo kahit na napakarami mong problem na pagdaraanan. So, yun yung isang goal. Pangalawang goal ni counseling. Yung lagi nating iisipin na hindi makakasakit sa mental health niya. Number 3 is problem solving. The resolution of the problem is also a goal that the client needs to achieve with the help of the counselor. So, lagi nating sinasabi na ang counseling daw, hindi siya sorting out client's problem. Kasi nga, trabaho ni client ang isort out ang problema niya. So, after sorting out his or her own problem, dito na pumapasok yung mga choices. Dito na pumapasok yung ibang perspective. Wherein, gagabayan siya ni counselor. So, doon papasok si problem solving. Okay? So, si problem solving, this may include problems which involve the self, academics, social or personal relationships, financial or occupational difficulties, or a combination of two or more of these. So, ito yung mga usual na problem ng mga kabataan natin right now, di ba? Yung self, yung personal relationships or social relationships, family problems, or academics. So, dito, isa sa mga goal ni counseling is to help the client solve his or her own problem. Number 4, we have the personal effectiveness. So, this is for personal improvement. This happens gradually to a person when he is committed to positive changes in himself. So, si personal effectiveness, mangyayari siya kapag meron na yung number 1, which is change in behavior. So, you will be personally effective if you have done the positive changes in your behavior. And last one, we have the decision making. So, ano ba si decision making? It is not the counselor who decides for the client, but it is the client who decides for himself. Okay? Uulitin natin siya. It is not the counselor who decides for the client. Paulit-ulit natin siyang sinasabi. Si client ang magsusort out. Si client ang magsusolve ng sarili niyang problem. So, counselor is only there to provide different choices and different perspective. Now, let us move to the scope of counseling. Ano-ano ba yung mga sakop ni counseling? So, number 1, we have the individual or personal needs and problems. So, throughout the lifespan, people are faced with changes. So for some, these changes may be gradual, allowing the person to slowly adjust to the change. So if there is a personal needs and a problem, you may be needing a counseling. So isa siya sa sakop ni counseling. Of course, no, mostly naman individual counseling ang nagaganap. Tama? Mostly naman, if you have the personal needs or personal problems, dun ka nagsisik ng counseling. Number 2, physical, emotional, social, and moral or marital problems. So in your case naman siguro wala pa naman nagkakaroon ng marital problems. So magfo-focus dito yung physical, emotional, social, and moral problem. So if you are experiencing one of those, you can seek counseling. So these are the adjustments that people go through. May include problems in physical appearance, capabilities, ano pa ba? Problems on how to control or express themselves, problems in expressing their emotions, problems with peers, problems with families, okay? Or problems with how to gain and maintain friendships, problems related to ethical issues, and social standards. For this naman, premarital, marital, and extramarital affairs, those are for married couples na. Number 3, we have the career advancement. So, career advancement, pumapasok din po siya sa sakop ng counseling. So, counseling is not only focuses on personal and social issues, but also on issues related to the person's professions. Of course, no, even though you are already working, even though you have already graduated in a specific course, there's still something that you feel na nagkukulang sa'yo when it comes to your profession, when it comes to your career. So if you feel that, you can seek counseling. So work is essential to an individual's subsistence and an important aspect of his well-being. So dito sa career advancement, you can seek counseling by letting your counselor know ano ba yung nararamdaman mo when you are doing your specific work, when you are doing your specific job. So in that way, you'll be able to know ano ba yung kulang, ano ba yung kailangan kong gawin para masatisfy sa profession na meron ka. Number 4, educational needs or educational problems. So, of course, educational needs or educational problems is isa siyang malaking portion ng buhay natin, di ba? So, magsimula nung mga around 3 to 5 years old, nag-start ka na mag-aral. Up until 22, 23 years old, you are studying. Right? So, this acquisition of knowledge and skills, however, varies from person to person depending on their age, intelligence, and emotional maturity. Of course, there will be frustrations which may occur because of failure in academic subjects. So, pwede rin naman na there's a frustration dahil nagkaroon ka ng conflict sa teacher mo. Meron kang hindi na ipasa. Okay? So, that can be a educational needs or educational problems. So, if that's so, you can seek a counseling. Number 5, we have the vocational, occupational, and professional needs. People do not always know what they want. Totoo yun. Even though we are already working, sometimes we are thinking, ano ba talaga yung gusto namin? Right? So, kayo ngayon, you are studying. Iniisip nyo, nasa tamang strand kaya ako? Gusto ko ba talagang itong strand na to? Right? There are times when one person would like to be many things all at the same time. So, though it may be possible at a certain age, a certain level of stability and expertise in a single field, vocation must be achieved. So, in that case, some form of counseling may be a great help. Kasi nga, kapag nag-seek ka ng counseling, kasi alam mo may kulang sa'yo when it comes to your vocational, occupational, or professional needs, you can seek counseling. So, your counselor may be able to help you kung ano ba talaga yung vocation or passion ng isang tao. And lastly, holistic individual development. So when we say holistic, your whole body, your whole persona, so as a whole, isa kang buong tao. So holistic individual development. The aim of the social science is to aid the development of individual potential. So, yung iba, aware sila sa mga talents nila, aware sila sa mga abilities nila, but some are not. So, if that's so, you can seek counseling if you think that you are having problem when it comes to your holistic development. For our last topic, we have the principles of counseling. So, counseling as a discipline is guided principles that will ensure that it is undertaken properly based on expected standards. So, number 1, we have the principle of acceptance. Each client must be accepted as an individual just like any other and to be treated as such. So, even though for example, this is just an example, okay? So, for those na nasa mga DSWD, they can accept counseling, right? So, may mga tao or may mga teenager or merong mga underage na nakakommit ng crime. And then, they are undergoing counseling. So, if that's so, kahit ano pa ang nagawa niya, kahit ano pa yung crime na nakommit niya, there should be an acceptance. Okay? So, there should be, that is the right of the client as a human being to be accepted. Number 2, the principle of permissiveness. So, in counseling, a relationship develops between the counselor and the client in an atmosphere of optimism. All thoughts and ideas the client may have are accepted by the counselor, for these are considered to be the client's perception. So when we say permissiveness, there is an atmosphere of optimism. So kahit ano pa ang sinabi ni client, so kahit ano pa yung nabanggit ni client, as a counselor, you need to accept that. Kasi yun ang perception ni client. Ganon tinitignan ni client yung situation. Okay? So, wala po dapat tayong judgmental na isip. So, we shouldn't be biased. Number 3, principle of respect for the individual. Counseling is a field of discipline that strongly advocates respect for the individual or the client. Just like what I've said earlier, the principle of acceptance. Kahit ano pa ang nagawa niya, kahit ano pa ang sinabi niya, kahit ano pa yung nakomit niya, you need to accept and respect. Number 4, principle of thinking with the individual. It is the role of the counselor to consider all the factors involving the client in order to understand how the client thinks. So it is important for the counselor and the client to be on the same page. Tama nga naman, di ba? So, as a counselor, you need to think, ano ba yung naiisip ni client? Kasi, in that way, you are going to work on the same page. Okay? Baka nasa introduction ka pa lang, baka nasa preface ka pa lang, nasa introduction na si client. Diba? So, ikaw baka nasa background ka pa lang, nasa results and conclusion na si client. Diba? Napakahirap naman nun. So, you should think with the client. You should think with the individual. Number 5, principle of learning. The process of counseling is also a learning process. Learning here involves the client seeing the problem or issue from different perspectives, analyzing the client's reactions, and realizing that there exists more than one option. So there is a learning. Of course, while you are giving the different perspective to the client, while you are letting the client to analyze the situation, you are also realizing na napakarami pang option na may ibibigay natin. You are also learning, right? You are also learning, you both are learning. Kasi may natututunan ka kay client, may natututunan rin si client sa iyo. And number 6, principle of consistency with ideals of democracy. All the principles are associated with ideals of democracy. These ideals emphasize equality in dealing with clients and respect for them as human beings. So remember, we are in a democratic country. We can say what we want, we can think what we want. There is always the idea of democracy. There is always the idea of freedom. So that's it for our lesson number 2, which is the disciplines of counseling. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you again on our next video. Have a good day!